everyone. It's Nigel here. Today I'm with Jarrod Kerr from Kiwibank. Jarrod's the Chief Economist. So we'd like to get a little bit of insight from Kiwibank around how they're seeing the economy and Jarrod's general thoughts on a few topics. Tauranga in the Western Bay of Plenty is an area with New Zealand's largest port and a very strong horticulture industry. So how New Zealand is faring in the world is quite important to us. Are you able to give a little bit of insight in terms of what you think the outlook is for both imports and exports, and maybe in the kind of next year or two?
Yeah, sure. So, what New Zealand's going through, many countries are going through. So, most countries have faced, quite a prolonged period of high inflation, and every central bank basically is looking to slow economies down after trillions of dollars worth of stimulus was thrown in over the COVID period. They're looking to unwind that and try and get inflation pressures lower. So interest rates are higher around the world, and that's biting. Our largest trading partner, China, they've got big issues in their property markets. Most cities are recording pretty hefty declines in property values. The economy's not growing as well as it could, and basically demand out of our largest trading partner, China, has come off, and we've seen exports to China come off over the last few months. So that international picture is one of much higher interest rates trying to cool economies down. It's working. We are seeing the global economy slow, and we may see some contractions in parts. That feeds through to us, via the port of Tauranga, with weaker demand from our trading partners, especially China. So that global backdrop's there, and then you think about New Zealand specific issues. We've had major weather events, which has been incredibly disruptive. I was in the Hawke's Bay just a couple of weeks ago, and saddening to see what's happened in parts there. We've had a cost of living crisis, where people are struggling to pay for essentials, and they're spending less on big ticket items. We've had a correction in our housing market where, by the Reserve Bank's will and design, they've lifted interest rates to get house prices down, and it's worked. So that's feeding through. There's a little bit less by way of construction and housing. There's the psychological impacts on households of not only having to pay a lot because of inflation, but also paying a lot more because of higher interest rates, and then realizing, well, actually my property has just dropped 20% in value. That hurts as well. So there is a lot going on, internationally, and then pulling it back into New Zealand. I sort of describe it as quite an awkward period right now. And then next year, hopefully things will turn around. We'll have a better balanced economy, I think, next year, and I'm hoping that the Reserve Bank will be in a position to start lowering interest rates. So that'll be a bit of a game changer, I think, next year.
Just anecdotally around Tauranga, you seem to see a few more for sale signs in front of houses. What are you seeing from Kiwibank on a national scale? Do you think the market's reached the bottom and is starting to climb its way back up again, or do you think there's still a little bit more pain?
Yeah, well, I think the official numbers, that we see from REINZ and CoreLogic and other sources, it looks like the housing market has bottomed. It looks like it sort of bottomed in May of this year or around then, and we've seen a few months of increases since then, and I think that continues. I think the psychology of the market's turned. It's gone from being quite downbeat to glimmers of hope and upbeat, and I think those for sale signs that you're seeing are probably people testing the market, right? They might have wanted to sell a year ago and thought, no, actually I'll hold off until things look like they've turned, and from what we're hearing, within Kiwibank, but also the mortgage advisors and that we deal with, there really has been a bit of a shift. So we're seeing more supply, which is what you're talking about, but we're also, I think, seeing a bit of a firming up of demand, and that's good. You kind of need that demand supply to start hitting each other and getting some sales. And I think the true litmus test of our housing market will be over the next few months. And all signs point to some green shoots and better activity.
I guess one of the recent stats we've seen too, and maybe it's been a bit of a talking point alongside those higher interest rates from the Reserve Bank, is the effect of immigration on New Zealand, particularly on the talent market. That also has a bit of a side effect around housing as well. What do you think the effect of that in relative terms is? Are they about the same in terms of interest rates on one hand and immigration on the other, or were you able to explain maybe how big a thing you think 100,000 extra people in New Zealand is?
Well, it's a lot. We've imported 150,000 migrants over the last year. That is a record. We've never done that in a year before. Between 2013 and 2019, we had the largest migration boom this country's ever seen. We've gone through COVID, we've popped out, and almost immediately we've seen this huge spike in migrants. We've lost 40,000 Kiwis. I've got to put that on the table. So the net number is 110, but that's 110,000 extra people. So from what you were saying on the housing market, bang on, these people need a home. They're either going to rent or buy. So that adds demand to a housing market, which is already in short supply. And it also adds demand to a lot of other things like, furniture and cars and everything that you have to buy when you set yourself up in a country. Even education, the whole lot. More people means we need more for them. And then on the other side, the positive bit in this is that we kind of knew that migration was keeping wages down, relative, but it was hard to prove. And we sort of knew between that 2013-19 period, wages were lower than what they otherwise would have been. So how do we test that? Well, why don't we lock the country up? And let's see what Kiwis demand. And here we go. We locked the country up. It took a lot more money to entice Kiwis to do a lot of these jobs. Wages spiked, and now we've opened the borders up again. I think we'll see wage pressure coming off. So from a business's point of view, the conversations we've been having with business over the last year has changed a lot. So this time last year, they were most concerned about trying to find labour. That was the big issue. Labour costs were rising, couldn't get workers, businesses only opening, 3-4 days a week when they're normally open for, 5, 6, 7. That's all turned now. We're not hearing that anymore. What we're hearing from businesses is concerns over future revenue, and that's the economic story, but they're not coming to us saying, we're screaming out for workers anymore. So I think that's been a big shift. And I can say the same thing about, Kiwibank. We were short workers last year and screaming out trying to find workers across the spectrum. Now, we filled a lot of those roles. So that's no longer chief concern. So on the one hand, you've got supply increasing, which is slightly deflationary in the labour market, but then you've got simply more bodies, more people, more agents in the economy. So there's more demand there as well. Exactly how that plays out is hard to guess. Our best guess is that because the migrants that are coming here are quite young, sort of aged between 20 and 30-ish, their impact on demand is not as much.
Right, because younger people, even though they do spend a bit of money in bars and restaurants and the likes, don't tend to spend as much in an economy as wealthier older people do, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So, they might come here and they might rent a room rather than renting a whole house. They might not buy a car. They might, that might not be buying furniture, that sort of stuff, yeah.
Right, so then we've got a very, very low unemployment figure nationally now. I think we're maybe 3.4% or something like that. Would you expect to see that come up into the maybe the higher fours at some stage over the next year? Do you think it's going to be that dramatic, the increase?
Yeah, I think moving into the high fours isn't actually that dramatic. It's probably more around where the Reserve Bank would like to see the unemployment rate. So you're right, it sort of bottomed around that 3.2, 3.4 level. We're currently at 3.6. We think we'll be at sort of 3.8, 3.9 by the end of this year, and then next year we've got it going up to sort of 5.5%. So yeah, it does sound like a big increase, but it's just a loosening of the labour market back to sort of more normal levels, I guess. We're not preparing ourselves for big, increases in defaults. Maybe a little bit, but not a big increase. Where we get worried, and where you stress test a bank, is when the unemployment rate spikes to sort of 7, 8, 9%. That's when you start seeing a lot of defaults coming through. We're not expecting that. We're all calling for this soft, shallow landing.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. I think obviously we want to see a labour market that provides a few more options for employers, but equally we don't want to see people out of jobs for too long either. So that's a very, very fine balance. On to other things. We obviously recently had an election. Typically, business confidence goes down a bit at that time. What do you think businesses might look for in a new government? Do you think they'd be more confident, less maybe? What's your outlook?
Well, this was probably the most vocal sort of pre-election that I've come into for a while. A lot of people, businesses, I talk to a lot of small to medium businesses, have the privilege of traveling around the country and doing that, and most of them were screaming out for change. And they felt that a national led government would be more pro-business, and I think that also extends to investors in the property market. People screaming out for interest deductibility to come back, a watering down of the triple CFA. These sorts of things is a bit more pro investors in the market. So there was some very loud voices prior to the election. I got asked, just about every presentation I did for months leading into the election, about that. So I would say, from my experience, this would be seen as a positive by most businesses, and it may even be a bit of a net positive for household confidence if we get that more activity in the housing market on the back of a few tweaks here and there.
And then looking longer term, you've spent a bit of time overseas, and you obviously follow New Zealand's fortunes compared to the rest of the world. What do you think the big economic opportunities are for New Zealand?
It's a great question. And when I first started, a long time ago, the late 90s, early 2000s, I remember there being a real big discussion around this tech boom, and how we need a new economy and it needs to be all about tech. And that was, a lot of debates amongst economists, and many were saying that the old economy is not good enough anymore. The agriculture, the traditional New Zealand economy, not good enough anymore. I said rubbish back then, and I say rubbish again now. We are going into a massive, I think, technological advancement with AI and all this sort of stuff, and it's exciting, but that's just going to help our biggest exports. That's just going to help our farming and horticulture and everything, right? It's just going to get better with the better technology, and I would say that in 20 years time we will still be an old economy with a lot better technology, right? We'll still be farmers and growers, and that's our comparative advantage in this world. So I think we can't lose sight of what we're really good at, and tourism is obviously a big part of that as well. And I think New Zealand's brand, I think the brand over COVID was actually strengthened. I think what we're seeing now is, an immediate bounce back in tourism. And I think, in 20 years' time, tourism's probably still going to be our largest, if not our, top 5 largest export. So in terms of opportunities, let's do what we do now better. In terms of new exciting stuff, we're really limited by our own imagination. I have no idea, how far AI is going to go, but it's going to, enhance most of our jobs. It's going to displace, I imagine quite a few jobs. How that plays out, I really don't know. But what I do know is there's going to be some massive changes.
Yep. I certainly agree that around the primary sector and adding to that rather than taking away or being competitive with it is going to be where New Zealand's sweet spot is, right, with our innovative culture plus damn good growing conditions and know-how and things like that. On to something completely different. We had a horrific summer last year weather-wise. From your point of view, and I guess a bank's economist point of view, do you see much difference in terms of what weather does to an economy, particularly over summer? Can we look forward to, I guess, a double boost here where we might get better economic conditions plus better weather conditions? How would that work?
Oh, mate, I think we're all quietly hoping, fingers crossed, that we're going to get a nice, warm, dry summer. Not too dry for the farmers, but dry for those of us that want to get out and have some fun. Does good weather, boost economic activity? Absolutely. Take a look at COVID. When we don't do too much when we're locked up, you're inside in the rain, right? So, if we get some good weather, and I think Kiwis are just itching to get out. We'll get out and we'll go to a cafe, we'll go and hire a kayak, we'll go and have some fun. I think some people are, most of us are screaming out for it this year. In terms of, that general weather question, climate change, these 1 in 100 year events that seem to turn up every couple of years, if that continues, then the damage, the resilience that we have to build, that's the story for this generation, right? How do we adapt? How do we work with these more adverse weather events happening at a far greater frequency?
Yeah, it's certainly pretty sobering when you look at our infrastructure deficit plus the resilience work we'll need to do. But I guess we're still smart enough to be able to find good ways around things as well, and more innovative ways of doing things. And you never know, we might even get better growing conditions for some regions as well.
Yeah, but your point on infrastructure is a good one, right? Take a look. If you arrived in Auckland right now as a tourist and you're coming to this clean, green, proudly beautiful country, and there's a sign on Mission Bay Beach that says "Don't swim because of sewage," it's not good enough, is it? Really, we really need to maintain our existing infrastructure and build, a lot more better infrastructure for the future.
Yeah, completely agree. And those tourists can always come to beautiful Mount Maunganui for their clean water requirements and some surf.
Exactly right.
Hey, thank you very much, Jarrod Kerr, Chief Economist for Kiwibank. Really insightful chat there, and we hope that'll be really useful to our members. Thanks.